There we go.
Taylor, thanks for your time. Two juicy games in the Big 12, one in Austin, one in Waco. Let's start with the game that we'll be covering. An elimination game, all but an elimination game, Kansas State and Baylor.
Well, you said it exactly right. There's still some teams alive in the Big 12 that I think people forget, and obviously your listener base won't, but I think the separation between TCU and everybody else, I think a lot of Big 12 fans have forgotten how many teams there's still a possibility of sneaking into the Big 12 title game. I think Baylor, the last couple of weeks, starting to get over some of the early season mistakes that we saw, I think back to even the BYU game earlier in the year, but obviously a lot on the line and an opportunity to still get to the Big 12 championship.
TCU and Texas in Austin. That's the game day game this week. TCU has CFP Dreams in front of them still. Big game again. This is the bottleneck for the Big 12 championship. These two games this weekend. How do you see this one shaking out?
I think there's a reason that you have Texas still as a full touchdown favorite. I think it probably means they're a 3-point favorite, and then you give them another 3 points for being, having the game in Austin. The key in this is the TCU's clearly been the second half team where Texas has been sort of the front runners, jumped out to a lot of early leads, given games away late. Even last week, it feels like there was an opportunity for them to lose late in Manhattan, Kansas, but close that out with the win. So that's what I'm paying attention to is, can Texas, assuming again that they jump out to a big lead, can they close out a game? And that is something that TCU throughout this season has done a really nice job of, is even if they're down multiple scores, hanging around. And then, the other thing is TCU going to knock out another Big 12 quarterback, which it feels like they've done in every single game in the Big 12 this year.
Taylor, what have you thought of Quinn Ewers and what we've seen at this point?
Well, the most interesting to me is, and there was rumors that he had a banged up finger and maybe was losing a fingernail against Oklahoma State, but that was the only game this year that I thought there were real issues where he'd missed some throws that, guys, I'm confident the four of us could have all hit some of these throws. And he was, airmailing things that were just didn't look like the guy that we'd seen earlier in the year. So I think there is some validity to that, some sort of injury. Outside of that, he has been everything that he was hyped up to be, and the billing that everything that we expected him to be. I think he's lived up to that when he's been healthy, and they're going to need him at his best, especially this week.
Yeah, I think one of our guys in the chat room mentioned that he maybe had some kind of a fingernails or something. I don't know, that he punched something and maybe a locker. I don't know the story, but he warmed up. He warmed up with a glove on, and I think that was the biggest thing. Oh.
I saw that on Twitter during the warm-ups, and then after the game, it comes out that he had something going on that right hand.
Yeah, because you're right. I think we all could make some of those throws because airmailed some of them. So TCU, man, they just keep winning. They're dynamic. Texas obviously scores a lot of points. Texas starts well. TCU finishes well. Anything there with you on that particular DNA of each team?
I think what's interesting for both of these teams, and I really think about Sarkisian for Texas, they're both so good at creating the explosive play. And Sarkisian specifically, his entire career, he's done such a good job at manufacturing explosive plays downfield where he gets guys open at the second level. TCU has done that well this year as well, and I think that's what's been so surprising because coming into this season, Duggan wasn't even the guy to start the season. If you think back to the opener against Colorado, and now he's one of the, I don't know if front runner is the right word for in the Heisman, but he's in the Heisman conversation at this point. And I think a big part of that is for both of these teams, you see a lot of explosive plays. And I think Texas secondary is still liable to give up the shot plays over the top, especially if they're not able to get pass rush, which I think that's going to be something critical to pay attention to.
I blanked on the game I was going to ask you about. Oh, you were in the American a lot, and one of the games we just talked about in our picks was UCF and Tulane, and UCF's been playing really well lately, coming off that loss against ECU. Tulane is at home. They play really tough defense. This one was really hard to pick, Taylor. These are two teams kind of on similar tracks right now.
Well, and they're both led by their defenses, really. And if Sunrise Plumlee plays for UCF, I think this is a very different type of game. But if he does not play, I like Tulane Tulane is led by their defense. They have played lights-out defense almost every week this year. Their lone loss against Southern Miss really was because Michael Pratt threw a pick six. If that doesn't happen, they're sitting there undefeated and close to cracking the top 10, where they have the one loss, but all of their wins, going back to the big win against Kansas State out of conference, that's all led by their defense. Last week against Tulsa, Tulane did not play well on offense. Michael Pratt had less than 150 yards passing, but they week in and week out play well on that side of the ball, and I think that's what you're going to have to expect in this one as well. Critical thing, again, is that John Rice Plumlee play, because his ability to extend plays is critical for them. If he can go, he's the type of guy that can make things happen outside of the scheme, which has been so big for UCF this year.
Taylor, Alabama obviously reeling a bit, especially by their standards, on the road against Ole Miss, who's sitting there at 8-1. A nice little battle of quarterbacks with Bryce Young and Jackson Dart. What are your thoughts on tight end Rebs?
Yeah, I think, there's been some overreactions, I think, to me this week with the people calling, for the end of, and it feels like we do this every couple of years. Anytime Bama doesn't make the playoff, it's always just the end for Saban. Their two losses are combined, less than 5 points that we're talking about. I know there were some other games this year that they could have lost, but I think some of the hysteria that we've seen from the talking heads this week, I would caution against. I think it's also interesting that this is likely where game day was going to go if Alabama had won, and what an environment that would have been in Oxford. The only other thing I would say, just on game day, on a side note, a little bit disappointed that they're coming to Austin this week. Having already been here, I thought, you mentioned Tulane a minute ago, I thought that was an awesome opportunity for them to go to New Orleans, big game in the American, but there's still something to play for, specifically for Ole Miss, where if they get some help, it's not impossible for them to represent the West. They need LSU to lose again, but still, obviously, a huge game anytime Alabama comes to town, especially right now, where if they win out and LSU loses, there's still an opportunity for Ole Miss to represent the SEC West.
So glad you said that, by the way. That's 2 times Austin's hosting this year, which, I guess, you double up, that's fine with certain games, but I'm with you, man. I wish that it would have been a different outcome there.
Yeah, I just think game day is so special when they go places that you don't have it all the time. Like App State earlier this year, that's not a team that's competing for anything other than bowl eligibility, right? I mean, they've got some losses in the Sun Belt, but it was one of the best atmospheres I can remember for college game day. And I thought they missed an opportunity. I thought it was interesting that Stanford Steve and the Bear from ESPN were both sort of lobbying for Tulane because, I think selfishly they wanted to go to New Orleans.
Oh yeah.
But I just thought, you've done Texas already this year, but that is it's the most valuable brand in college football. So I think in this case, it's really just money talks.
How much do you feel like, and it appears based on what Sonny Dykes said even over the weekend, that Quentin Johnston went out. We had Brian Estridge on Monday. How much of an impact they're explosive without him, but don't they almost must need a big game from him tomorrow?
I think there's no doubt. And just like we talked about a minute ago, I mean, the explosive plays, that's something I expect in this game. If he can't go, that limits their ability to create those shot plays. And in this game specifically, you have to have that. Expecting that, again, Texas to jump out to a lead. But if you want to stay in this game and have an opportunity to win, he has to go.
Taylor, if you have a Heisman pick right now, who is it?
Earlier in the year, it would have been C.J. Stroud. But as time's gone along, I really hasn't had anything that's been spectacular. I mean, he's had a couple sub-150 passing yard performances out of the Big Ten. This is going to kill me to say this, but I think a guy that deserves more credit than he's getting right now is Bo Nix. Look at what he's doing for Oregon right now, and take out the first game of the year against Georgia. I know that's asking a lot, but I don't know that there's many people that are playing better than he is right now. Corum at Michigan, obviously he deserves a lot of credit there as well, but I don't think Michigan's schedule has been very challenging. Bo Nix to me has impressed me far beyond what I expected out of him after transferring from Auburn. And I would add, doesn't it speak volumes for the situation that Auburn's in now, and then you remove him and how good he looks with a change of scenery?
I was just going to ask you that about, I mean, if you're trying to sell the Auburn job to someone and, downplay the chaos off the field there in the alumni, if, look, Gus Malzahn's having a great time at UCF. Bo Nix is a superstar now as where he was a head case at Auburn. It's not exactly, a ringing endorsement to come to the Plains.
No, it's not. And it is what I feel like Texas was a few years ago. If you guys remember, Kirk Herbstreit went on a rant on College Game Day a few years ago about how toxic Austin was. And I remember that vividly because I live in Austin. And that, to me, is very similar to how that Auburn job is now. Just like you're talking about, there's some influential people involved there, and a lot of those are the people that wanted Brian Harsin out last year, and then all the off-the-field scandal stuff gets brought up, which we don't even know if that ever actually happened. I totally agree with you. If I'm a big-name coach looking around, that's not high on my list of places that I would relocate to.
Taylor, a shot in the dark here because I don't know how much you've seen him play, but there's a pretty good little quarterback matchup in the ACC this weekend with Sam Hartman in Wake Forest and Drake May at North Carolina. Pretty close game, just looking at the odds and all of that. I was particularly curious just what you thought about Drake May and how much you've seen him.
I'm glad you brought him up because I forgot to mention him when we were talking about Heisman a minute ago, but he deserves to have his name as one of the dark horse guys as well, where there's an outside shot. It's not very likely, but if they were to win out and they do it convincingly, it's not impossible that North Carolina sticks their neck out there for some playoff contention. And it's been wholly led by their offense. Their defense is one of the worst in college football, but still winning, have just the one loss this season, and it's because of Drake May. For anybody that hasn't spent any time watching him, it's not just college numbers either. This is going to be a future first five type of pick kind of guy. Has all the right intangibles, delivers the ball, he's on time, and his teammates seem to really like him. And beyond just this season, I think there's a lot to like and pay attention to for Drake May in Chapel Hill.
Taylor, Blake Shapen was given the job, earned it based on the competition in the spring and obviously how he finished last year, even though he missed the Sugar Bowl. When they made the decision, I think a lot of people, I admit that I thought they'd be not slinging it around, but he would be more dynamic in the passing game. A lot of it, the young receivers, now they're growing up. The running game is their main bread and butter. But did you expect a little bit more from him up to this point?
I think I did. I think also early in the year it became, and I mentioned the BYU game earlier, it became clear that they were going to struggle to hit shot plays early in the year. And maybe they don't have the weapons on the outside. I also don't think O-line play has been great for the Bears for a lot of this season. But, for Baylor fans also, I've had a chance to call some of Gary Bohannon earlier this year. I think they definitely made the right choice in who they went with. But I do think I'm surprised at the lack of explosiveness that Baylor's put out, given sort of what we saw last year, especially late in the season. It just feels like a step down from what we saw towards the end of last season.
Thank you. Good luck, Houston and Temple. Houston has been, I don't know who they've been. Who have they been?
They've been a shootout with SMU is what they've been here lately.
Yeah. How about that one? How about Tanner Mordecai, Taylor?
Yeah, that took me about 6 hours to comb through that film, but it's an opportunity for Houston to get to another bowl game. So we will see. But yeah, as always, guys, I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you very much. Got to go to Taylor McHargue, ESPN college football broadcaster analyst, with us on Friday.